Hey everybody, I'm Joanna Moody and I'm here to take you through one of my favorite warm-up or finish techniques, continuous line drawing. Some of you might have done a blind contour drawing before. This is a little different in that you can look at your paper, but it takes you through focusing on what you observe, what you see versus what you think you see. This technique is really good. It strengthens the right brain and it overrides symbolic drawing and helps you define your own style. Whether you use this as a warm-up technique for a drawing or you do it for a finished postcard, it's a great exercise to really hone in on your skill of observation. After we do the drawing, I'm going to take you through a simple color scheme, mixing and applying to your image, and who knows, you might end up with a beautiful finished product. Okay, so we'll get started with some materials. You are going to need a few pieces of sketch paper if you want to do a few drawings before you do a more detailed drawing. You're basically going to just sketch some stuff out. No matter how fast or slow you go with this, you just might want to do a few. It's a good warm-up practice. And then you'll also need a piece of watercolor paper. It can be a scratch piece that you're going to do some color mixing with. And you'll need your final postcard if you are doing a postcard. This is just an example of a watercolor 5x7. So if you do decide to do this as your final project, you'll need that as well. You will need a drawing utensil. So I like to do mine in pencil because I like to go and kind of make some adjustments at the end. But if you're feeling confident or excited or just wild, you can start with a permanent pen or even a Sharpie. It does need to be permanent so that it doesn't bleed when you add your watercolor paints. You'll need a water container, something that you do not drink out of. You need some watercolor paints. You can use gouache, you can use acrylic, you can add water to acrylic to create a watercolor effect, and it will bind with the paper. You won't run into any issues with that. So whatever paint you have is fine. Brushes, I like to have an assortment of brushes, particularly when I'm mixing colors. I like to have at least two so that I can keep my colors clean and add in. So, a variety of sizes is nice. You definitely, with the small scale that we're doing, it's pretty handy to have a small brush for detail and then some larger brushes, but you can work with whatever you have on hand. Masking tape, if you want to create a border for your postcard so that you have a nice white border around it. It's optional. You do not have to do that, but you can play with it if you like. This is just blue painter's tape. And lastly, you need a subject. Palette paper or a palette. You'll want a palette so that you can mix your colors. My subject today is going to be just a pair of scissors so that I can demonstrate for you. You can use your hand, your non-dominant hand. You can use a photograph. I've drawn some examples of all different kinds of things. We've got a portrait here, and this is more of a blind contour, but it shows you the contour lines. I've got a Lego character. I've got a portrait of my son, and then I also have the scissors that we'll be doing. So whatever you have on hand, if it's your final image for your window or other theme, that's great too. So let's get started. Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and start our drawings. Like I said, you can pick whatever subject you want. I have an example here of a two-dimensional subject drawing from a photograph. If you've ever been in my class before, you know that I really encourage people to draw from life as much as possible, but I understand that a lot of times you have to draw from a photo. I do it myself as well. A few things that I just want to remind you of, a few tips before you start drawing, is the continuous line drawing is just that. It's a continuing line. Once you place your pen or pencil on the paper, you're committing, and you're going to take your line all throughout. So it's really good starting out to take a look at your object. So take a look at your paper, your substrate. Do you want it horizontal? Do you want it vertical? Which will complement your subject best? How will you fit your subject on the paper? I even like to personally, so my scissors would be a horizontal just to fit them on landscape style versus vertical portrait style. I even air draw it sometimes with my pencil or with my hand to kind of just sketch it out and figure out, do I want it angled? Do I want it to go off the page? Do I want it centered, large, small? So think about your subject with the substrate before you start. Look at the edges and the detail and kind of imagine if you have to draw a continuous line, how will you follow the object? Make a path for yourself, a map with your eyes. All of these steps beforehand, visualizing beforehand, will help you just get into the drawing and put down what you're observing instead of having to make all those plans as you go. It will help you focus on your hand-eye coordination instead of making decisions. Go slowly, snail's pace. If it helps, close one eye as you draw, and just make sure that you're capturing detail. I'm going to take you through just finishing this scissor drawing. As you can see, I've got one here that is pretty much completed. I could go back and add more detail, but I just want to give you a feel for talking you through your pencil, describing what you're seeing as your hand moves along. So I'm going to start where I left off and just go ahead and describe the blades of the scissors with my pencil. And starting here, I'm really looking at the angles of the lines as I go. So my eye is moving at the same pace as my pencil. And as you can see, you're gonna find that you might make some mistakes that you have to then correct later. That's fine. You are really just trying to focus on what you're observing. The more lines, in my opinion, the better, the more interesting the subject looks. That's part of the effect of this drawing. So, go ahead and get started. Okay, now it's time to paint. So to paint these, I'm going to take you through just a really simple color scheme that can be applied to your drawings. And we're going to use the triadic color scheme. So this is a great example, this Warhol. I know it's super simplified, but it's just to kind of give you an example. He chose the primary colors, which is an example. So a triadic color scheme is 3 points equally positioned around the color wheel. Here's 3 different examples, and like I said, this Warhol is the primary colors. So they've each got 3 colors between them. And you can see this even with this simplistic color pattern that he's chosen, even this has a variation. Like a lot of the red is actually pink. So you're going to use basically 3 colors evenly spaced, but you're going to adjust them a bit. And this is an Egon Schiele that I just wanted to have on hand so that you can see, even with limited colors and even with not describing all the areas, you know, you can get a really punchy, beautiful painting with line as a focus. So we are going to take the triadic color scheme, and here I've printed out an example of your color wheel as well as 3 examples of different pairs that you can choose. So the triadic color scheme is 3 points evenly spaced on the color wheel. And the most obvious example is your primaries, like Warhol used. I'm going to lead you through an example of just some color mixing to get you started, but you could choose, so the secondary colors, mixing the primaries, you've got orange, violet, and green. Those are also equally spaced. Or you can shift it, as they did here, having blue-green, red-violet, and yellow-orange. So depending on what you want to do, you can experiment with different triadic color schemes, but I'll just take you through real quick. What I have done on this chart is I've put my hue, which is just the color on the color wheel. I've made a tint. With watercolor, you're just going to add water. If you're using some other type of paint like acrylic, you can add white. I added black to create a shade, and then I mixed the complement to create a couple of additional, more neutral brownish types of the original hue. So the complement you'll find on the opposite end of the color wheel. For red, I mixed green. For blue, I mixed orange. And for my yellow, I'm going to mix violet. So just taking you quickly through, you'll place your original hue. So I've got my straight yellow just right out of the tube. Then I'm going to mix water to show just how light I can take this. And I like to do a little gradient myself. Wash out my brush. I'm going to take black to make my shade. And black and yellow can do some cool things. Kind of make some interesting greens depending on the medium you choose. There, we've got a nice olive green that you could use in your composition. And finally, I'm going to show you my palette. I'm going to take my color and I'm going to add the complement. So yellow is violet. I'm going to take a little bit of violet and I'm going to start with just a little. You get that beautiful brownish orange. And then I'm going to add a little more. And this is just, painter's choice. You can add as much or as little as you want to just show yourself as you go through your painting what your different options are. A lot of people don't go through these steps, but it can really help as you start to paint to just know what you have to choose from using a limited color scheme. Okay, so you guys are ready to go. You're going to take your colors and you're just going to apply them to the drawing that you've done. Here is a sketched example of that original drawing that I showed you, where I applied, the green is missing, but I applied a orange, violet, and green, a secondary triadic color scheme to this painting. I encourage you to remember the rule of a lot, some, a little. So I let the violet dominate this color scheme, and then I put some green, and then I just used a little orange. So putting that in your brain as you go into it, can create more interesting than equal parts of all things. So just take your subject and play with it. Have fun. This should be a blast. I can't wait to see your work.